We've had a few office hours lately where founders have been asking about startup boards. And I thought, okay, this is a great time not only do a workshop, so we have a workshop coming up where I'll break this down in a little more detail and make it interactive. But I thought I'd take a moment just to talk about boards in general and begin presenting a bit of a framework in which to think about boards. And this is just going to present my framework. And like I said, later on in the workshop or in office hours, we can start to dive in, do a little deeper dive into boards, especially how to configure for you. Let me start by saying that boards are necessary from a legal standpoint, but they can add a lot of value in terms of a strategic standpoint. So you want to be starting to think about, you want to start thinking about your board from a legal perspective, because every company needs to have a board. So as soon as you incorporate, you're going to need a board. And then when you take investment, you're going to need a board. And the more investment that you take in, the more board seats you're going to have. And so your board is going to evolve over time. So boards can be very forgiving in the sense that you don't have to get it right all the time. I sit on several boards myself, and they change year over year. Board members come in, board members go out, and the complexity of the issues and the environment and the configuration of the startup changes. So remember, you don't have to necessarily nail it right away when it comes to your board. One of the mistakes that I think founders make is they think that they need to have an amazing board to raise money. In fact, it might be correlated opposite. I haven't really dove into it as much yet, but I find that boards, if you make it too complicated in the beginning, it can actually be a little harder to get through all the red tape, if you will, when it comes to making decisions. Sometimes boards, depending on who you have on your board, can create a little bit of impediment and prevent the startup from being agile, especially if you have a real visionary type of company with a CEO trying to get out there and do new things. While at the same time, that might actually work for the company as well to prevent that CEO from doing something super crazy and mortgaging the future of the company on a hunch or a decision. But I like to think of boards as the asset that's going to help you at the time. And you don't necessarily need a board unless they're going to be providing lots of contacts or investing themselves. You don't need board members to raise money. It'd actually be a lot better to have, say, an advisory board, or just hire people to be inside the company and to be a part of your fundraise, help build value of the company, et cetera. So let's look at what a board might look like in terms of how you want to be making decisions, and especially when it comes to compensation of the board. And again, I see a lot of founders start to make some mistakes in the beginning, and nothing's worse. I've had to deal with this myself. Nothing's worse than having the wrong board or the wrong board members for the year and working through the process and trying to build your startup while contending with a board that you might not necessarily like. So first things first, just don't jump at the chance of creating a board outside of the bare minimum that you need. If you are looking to build a board, here's how I like to look at it. And I'm just going to put it on a chart. Please forgive the lines here that might be going in a different direction or not quite symmetrical. So on the bottom, I'm going to basically create a continuum of time, size, and value. And they're all correlated to each other. They all contribute to each other. So the longer your startup is in existence, the more it grows and the more value it has, you're going to be moving across this X axis right here. And then on the top side, you're going to, or the Y axis, you're going to have something called fiduciary responsibility. All right, fiduciary responsibility. So your board members have a fiduciary responsibility. It is, in fact, a legal responsibility to represent the shareholders and to be part of the governance of the company, which is the reason board members all have to register, like they have to be reflected in the minute books, and there's a lot of paperwork. And in fact, companies or shareholders can sue the board for mismanagement. So that's where the fiduciary responsibility increases. And so the size of the fiduciary responsibility equates to maximum risk. So we're going to just have maximum risk here. And then as the time size value of the company, increases, the more likely that you're going to be, you're moving towards success, right? So over a period of time, you want to be moving to success. And so here's how I like to look at the board configuration. Let me load up another color here. And this little curve here goes like this. And I like to call this the expertise curve and also compensation. The question of should I compensate my board? Well, the answer is it depends on the state of your organization, time, size, value, and the fiduciary responsibility. So the more we go up into this top level here, as we move up the curve, then the more money compensation, but the more value that you're going to need. So up top here is value of that compensation. So always compensate according to value. And believe me, the wrong board members will kill your company from a financial standpoint if you're compensating them and giving them ownership and shares, but the right board members are worth their weight in gold. Let's look at the different stages then and potentially explore. So when we're starting off in the beginning, so say you're here and you're just starting off, well, guess what? You don't need a lot of expertise because you're just starting off. And so your compensation is going to be nothing. I highly recommend don't compensate board members in the beginning. It just really adds some power dynamics unless you've got that one board member who's really going to move the needle for you. I don't know. I would say the right chairman is definitely an awesome individual to have on your board, but the fiduciary responsibilities are low. So for example, just some reporting. So typical board would have, let's say, the CEO and could have, one other person, acting, the CEO acts as the president, and then you have like a secretary and then maybe a treasurer or different things like that. And really those individuals are there to help with the reporting. So the CEO doesn't have to do it. For me, when I'm the CEO of a company, I really covet my treasurers and I covet the secretaries because they do all the administrative work and I can just focus on managing the company, and they keep our books really clean as far as our minute books and all the different stuff, all the different little administrative tasks that have to happen to ensure that you are actually achieving those legal responsibilities required to you as part of a board. So then as you grow, you're adding expertise. And then what's going to happen is you're going to have three sort of main functions in the board. So you're going to have the different executive board members, and these are individuals who execute. So for example, the CEO is employed by the company and executes according to the guidance and agreements made with the board. And then you have non-executives, and these are individuals who are part of the board and who actually they are not employed with the company, and they just provide that overall guidance. And there are different individuals that can play different parts of it. And I always recommend that you really have a smattering of the different people that will balance it out. So think of it just in terms of a startup team, where what you don't want is you don't want overlap of domain expertise or different things like that. And so you have a sort of a diverse group of board members who will have different types of perspectives and maybe not get pigeonholed or only look at one side of the situation. So you got your executive directors and you got your non-executive directors. And then what you're also going to have is your independent. Okay, your independents. And so here's how it works is independent directors. And these are individuals who actually kind of, let's say, split the vote or are the tiebreakers. And what happens is they don't have any ties to the startup. So like, for example, the executive CEO, non-executive might be someone who's really actively involved helping the individual, but they're not employed by the company. And then independent, someone who just sits third party, not biased, don't have any direct ties, don't have anything to gain or lose, and they help provide sort of that governance balance in case, let's say, the executives and non-executives are loggerheads or the board is split, and you're going to be adding those. Now, the independent directors don't come in till really later, and that's because the fiduciary responsibility increases over time. So when you're at the highest risk up here, and you want the maximum success, guess what? You're going to have to compensate and you're going to need higher levels of expertise. That's the reason you see publicly traded companies really take time to establish who's going to be on the board, and they make sure. And being a chairman is a really, really big deal because, in fact, that's the boss's boss. That's the individual that represents the shareholders. And also, if you have multiple investors, for example, if you have a lead investor and they've led around, most likely they're going to ask for seats aboard. In fact, that's going to probably be a requirement, usually is, unless a very special circumstance. And then what happens is they're trusting the chairman. And so everybody has a say on who that chairman is going to be. And that chairman really works closely, especially with the CEO, and they start providing guidance for the company, and they clear the path for the CEO to do their job, but they also watch the CEO's back, and they make sure that the CEO does not misrepresent or is the best person appropriately representing the interests of the shareholders. So shareholder supremacy is a major thing when it comes to the time size value of your company, if you've raised more money. And this is when situations occur when the board decides to remove the CEO and different things. They have the power. So a lot of times, founders who don't have experience think, oh, the board serves me. Yes, in many ways, the board should serve this CEO, but really the CEO is a servant of the board. That's how it works. So this is something that you want to really consider, especially if you're that early stage founder and you're putting the board together. Now, this is very different from a board of advisors, like I've mentioned before, and that's something that maybe you want to consider is a difference between an advisory board, which is a completely different set of objectives and parameters that you want to consider. So I'm going to leave that for another video. So that's your little overview in terms of a model and how to start thinking of a board and your introduction. Like I said, I'm going to be doing a workshop, but if you need office hours on it, feel free to ask, and we'll make sure that we get you what you need. And in the meantime, keep grinding away at your startups, and let's see what we can do to help you out.